let me tell you something uncomfortable about your brain. It was not designed to make you rich. It was designed to keep you alive in a world that no longer exists. Your brain is optimized for survival on the African savanna 200,000 years ago. It wants immediate calories. It wants safety. It wants to stay with the tribe and avoid risks that could get you killed. That biology served our ancestors well. It kept them alive, but it is terrible for building wealth, because building wealth requires you to delay gratification, to take calculated risks, to do things the tribe thinks are crazy. Your brain is actively working against your financial success. And if you want to make real money, you need to train it to work differently. Making money is not about luck. It is not about being in the right place at the right time. Those things help, but they are not the foundation. The foundation is cognitive training. I did not build Amazon by following my instincts. My instincts told me to stay at my comfortable job on Wall Street. My instincts told me that starting an internet bookstore was risky and stupid. My instincts screamed at me to play it safe. I built Amazon by training my brain to ignore those instincts, by rewiring my decision-making process, by changing how I evaluate risk and reward. And you can do the same thing. Your brain is plastic. It can be trained. It can be rewired. But you have to do it deliberately. You have to commit to the process. Here is the first thing you need to understand. Most people have an untrained brain that complains about lack of resources. They say, I do not have enough money to start. I do not have the right connections. I do not have the education. I do not have the time. The untrained brain looks at what is missing and stops. It sees obstacles as permanent. It sees constraints as excuses. The trained brain does the opposite. It looks at constraints and gets creative. It asks, given what I have, what can I invent? This is the difference between resourcefulness and resources. Resources are what you have. Resourcefulness is what you do with them. And resourcefulness is a trained skill. It is a mental habit you build through deliberate practice. The untrained brain wants more resources before it moves. The trained brain moves with what it has and figures it out along the way. That distinction is worth millions of dollars. Let me give you the first training protocol. You need to rewire your brain for long-term thinking. The default human brain wants results in 90 days. It wants immediate feedback. It wants to see progress now. This is hardwired into our biology. Our ancestors needed to know if their hunting strategy worked within days, not decades. But that timeline is poison for wealth building, because real wealth compounds over years, not months. If you think in 3-year increments, you are competing with everyone. Every business, every entrepreneur, every investor is thinking 3 years out. The competition is brutal. But if you think in 7-year increments, you compete with almost no one. Most people cannot think that far ahead. Their brains rebel against it. They need faster feedback. They need quicker wins. And that impatience keeps them average. I built Amazon on a 7-year timeline. When we went public in 1997, I told investors not to expect profits for years. I told them we were building infrastructure, we were building customer trust, we were building a foundation that would pay off eventually, not immediately. Most investors hated this message. They wanted quarterly profits. They wanted immediate returns. But I was training my brain and my company to think differently, to optimize for the long term, not the short term. And that long-term thinking created hundreds of billions of dollars in value, but it required me to train my dopamine system. I had to teach my brain to get excited about the vision, not just the immediate paycheck. I had to learn to enjoy the process of building something that would not pay off for years. That is a learned skill. It does not come naturally. You have to practice it. Here is how you practice it. You pick a project that will take years to bear fruit. Maybe it is learning a difficult skill. Maybe it is building a side business. Maybe it is investing in assets that compound slowly over time. And you commit to it with no expectation of immediate results. You train your brain to find satisfaction in the daily work, not the outcome. You celebrate small milestones that represent progress toward the 7-year goal. And you do this until your dopamine system rewires, until you genuinely enjoy playing the long game. This is not motivational talk. This is neurological training. Your brain will resist at first. It will crave faster feedback. But if you stay consistent, it adapts. And once it adapts, you have an enormous advantage over everyone still chasing quick wins. Now let me give you the second protocol. You need to shift your brain from extraction to contribution. The default brain asks, how can I get money from people? It sees every interaction as a transaction. It thinks like a mercenary. Take the money and run. Maximize profit on every deal. Extract as much value as possible from every situation. This seems logical, but it is actually the slow path to wealth because people sense extraction. They feel when you are trying to take from them, and they resist. They do not trust you. They do not come back. You might win once, but you do not build an empire on extraction. The trained brain asks a different question. How can I invent something that genuinely improves their lives? It thinks like a missionary. It obsesses over creating value, not capturing it. And here is the paradox. Missionaries make more money than mercenaries in the long run. Not because they are trying to make money, but because they build better products. They solve real problems. They create things people actually want. And when you do that, money follows naturally. It is not the goal, it is the byproduct. I did not start Amazon to get rich. I started it because I saw an opportunity to use technology to help customers access books they could not get in their local stores. The wealth came because we stayed obsessed with the customer, not the profit. Let me be specific. Every decision at Amazon starts with the customer, not the competitor, not the profit margin, not the stock price, the customer. What do they need? What do they want? What problem can we solve for them? This is not altruism. This is trained cognition. I trained my brain to genuinely care about customer experience because I know that long-term success flows from customer satisfaction. But this training goes against instinct. The instinct is to maximize what you take. The training is to maximize what you give. And you have to practice this daily. You have to catch yourself when you are thinking about extraction and consciously shift to contribution. What can I add? What can I improve? What can I invent? Ask those questions enough times and your brain rewires. It starts looking for ways to create value automatically. And that cognitive shift is worth more than any business degree. But here is the catch. To create value, you have to be willing to be wrong. Which brings me to the third protocol. You need to train your brain to embrace successful failure. The default brain fears failure. It sees failure as a threat to survival because in the ancestral environment, failure often meant death. If you failed to hunt, you starved. If you failed to find water, you died. So your brain evolved to avoid failure at all costs. It wants certainty. It wants guaranteed outcomes. And this fear of failure is the number one thing that keeps people broke because you cannot innovate without experimenting. And you cannot experiment without failing sometimes. I have failed more than most people have tried. The Fire Phone was a massive failure. We lost hundreds of millions of dollars. It was embarrassing. But that failure taught us things that led to Alexa and Echo, which are now huge successes. If we had been afraid to fail with the Fire Phone, we never would have tried. And we never would have learned what we learned from that experience. So I trained my brain to see failure differently. Not as a referendum on my worth, not as a mistake to be ashamed of, but as data, as information, as tuition paid for the next attempt. To invent, you have to experiment. And if you know it is going to work, it is not an experiment, it is just execution. Here is how you train this. You deliberately put yourself in situations where you might fail. Small, contained failures. Maybe you try to learn a new skill and accept that you will be terrible at first. Maybe you launch a small project knowing it might not work. Maybe you have a difficult conversation you have been avoiding. The point is to expose your brain to failure in low-stakes environments so it learns that failure is not death, it is just feedback. And over time, your fear of failure decreases. You become more willing to take calculated risks, more willing to try things that might not work, and that willingness to experiment is what creates breakthrough opportunities. But you cannot think your way into this. You have to do it. You have to fail small, repeatedly, until your brain stops treating failure as a catastrophe. Let me ask you directly, when was the last time you failed at something? If you cannot remember, you are not trying hard enough. You are playing too safe. You are staying in your comfort zone. And your comfort zone is exactly where wealth does not happen. Wealth happens at the edge, where you are trying things you are not sure will work, where you are experimenting, where you are learning, and yes, failing. If you are not failing regularly, you are not training your brain correctly. You are letting the fear of failure run your decisions, and that fear will keep you average forever. Now let me give you the fourth and final protocol, high-velocity decision-making. The default brain freezes when it lacks complete information. It wants certainty before it moves. It runs endless analysis. It gathers more data. It waits for perfect clarity. This is called analysis paralysis. And it kills more businesses than bad decisions do. Because while you are waiting for perfect information, the world is moving, opportunities are closing, competitors are acting, and you are standing still, analyzing. I train my brain to classify decisions into two types: type 1 decisions and type 2 decisions. Type 1 decisions are one-way doors. They are irreversible. Once you make them, you cannot go back. These decisions require careful thought. You need to gather significant information. You need to move slowly. Examples are selling your company, launching a whole new business line, or making a major acquisition. These are type 1. Be careful. But most decisions are not type 1. Most decisions are type 2. They are two-way doors. You can make them see what happens and reverse course if needed. You can change your mind. You can pivot. You can undo them. The mistake most people make is treating every decision like a type 1. They treat changing a website design like it is selling the company. They treat hiring one person like it is a merger. They move slowly on things that should be fast, and that slowness kills momentum. The trained brain knows the difference. It moves fast on type 2 decisions. It acts on 70% of the information. It experiments, learns, and adjusts, and it reserves slow, careful analysis for true type 1 decisions. This asymmetry in decision speed is a massive competitive advantage. While your competitors are in meetings debating a reversible decision, you have already tried 3 things, learned what works, and moved on. Here is how you train this. Start categorizing your decisions. Before you make a choice, ask yourself, is this a one-way door or a two-way door? Can I reverse this if I am wrong? If the answer is yes, make the decision faster. Do not wait for perfect information. Act on what you know and adjust as you go. And notice how your brain resists this. It wants more certainty. It wants more data. But push through that resistance. Make the reversible decision and see what happens. And over time, you will get comfortable with speed. You will get comfortable with acting on incomplete information. And that comfort with velocity is what separates builders from planners. Let me bring this all together. Your brain is a tool. If you do not train it, if you do not command it, it will default to its factory settings. And those factory settings are designed for survival in a prehistoric world, not wealth creation in a modern one. The default brain wants short-term safety. The trained brain thinks in decades. The default brain wants to extract value. The trained brain wants to create it. The default brain fears failure. The trained brain sees it as data. The default brain freezes without certainty. The trained brain moves with speed. These are not personality traits. These are trained cognitive habits, and you can build them starting today. But here is what nobody tells you. Training your brain is uncomfortable. It goes against your instincts. It requires you to do things that feel wrong at first. Thinking 7 years out feels like wasting time when you need money now. Focusing on contribution feels naive when you need to pay bills. Embracing failure feels reckless when you are scared. Moving fast feels dangerous when you are uncertain. All of those feelings are your factory settings fighting back. Your brain resisting the training, and you have to push through that discomfort. You have to do the thing that feels wrong until it starts feeling right. That is how neural pathways change. That is how cognitive habits form. I use a framework for this. I call it the regret minimization framework. When I am facing a decision, especially one that requires me to override my instincts, I project myself forward to age 80. I imagine looking back on my life and I ask, will I regret not training my brain? Will I regret playing it safe? Will I regret optimizing for comfort instead of growth? The answer is always yes. I would regret the drift. I would regret letting my default brain run my life. I would regret being average when I could have been extraordinary. And that future regret motivates present action. It helps me push through the discomfort of training because I know the alternative is worse. So let me challenge you. What cognitive habit is holding you back right now? Are you thinking too short term? Are you focused on extraction instead of contribution? Are you afraid to fail? Are you paralyzed by uncertainty? Pick one, just one, and decide to train it. Decide that for the next 90 days, you are going to deliberately practice the opposite of your default. If you think short term, practice thinking in years. If you focus on practice creating value. If you fear failure, deliberately try things that might not work. If you freeze on decisions, practice moving faster. And notice the discomfort. Notice your brain resisting. But stay consistent, do it daily, and watch what happens. Your brain will adapt. It has no choice. Neuroplasticity is real. The brain you have today is not the brain you are stuck with forever. You can rewire it. You can change it. You can train it to serve your goals instead of sabotaging them. But only if you do the work. Only if you push through the discomfort. Only if you stay consistent long enough for the new pathways to form. This is not theory. This is how I built Amazon. Not by being smarter than everyone else, not by having more resources, but by training my brain to think differently, to operate on longer timelines, to focus on customers, to embrace experimentation, to make decisions fast. And you can do the same. It is always day one. That phrase means something specific. It means you are always at the beginning, you are always learning, you are always training. The moment you think you have arrived, the moment you stop training your brain, you enter day two. And day two is decline. Day two is stagnation. Day two is the slow drift back to average. So you have to treat today like it is the first day. Like you are just starting. Like the training is never done, because it is not. Your brain will always want to drift back to the factory settings. You have to actively maintain the new program.